Got it. Here it comes. Take it away, Chris.
This is AV Superfriends On Topic, a 30-minute monthly roundtable focused on a single topic. This discussion will be opinionated, to the point, and saturated with our well-known blend of painfully won expertise and deeply ingrained immaturity. For April 2023, it's the AV Superfriends On Topic. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure with the AV Superfriends. My name is Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Jamie, Mark, Larry, and Justin. And on today's show, we are going to dive deep into the riveting world of IT budgeting. I have already...
They say that everyone currently has a podcast. And in 2023, that's largely true. Currently, there are over 4 million podcasts available online. However, if you start to dig into those numbers, they shrink pretty quickly. If you look at only podcasts that have at least 3 episodes, that number shrinks to almost half. If you set the bar to 10 episodes, you're now down to 720,000 podcasts available. And if you look at podcasts that put out a weekly episode, you're down to 200,000. So there seems to be a disconnect between people that can start a podcast and people that can successfully maintain a podcast. We're going to investigate that today. We're going to do so by looking at a group that has successfully put out podcasts for over 3.5 years, the AV Superfriends. We're going to talk to them about how they got started, the challenges they faced, their growth, and what they see next. And at the end of the video, we'll let them share some tips and tricks to help you navigate those same challenges. AV Superfriends are a group of audio and video, higher education technology, and e-learning nerds, sharing their successes and failures related to the intersection of AV and pedagogy. They are formed by Chris Dector, Jamie Reinhardt, Mark Kolowazinski, Justin Rexing, and Larry Darling. Thanks for joining today, Chris. So, the first question I want to ask is, how was the group formed?
The AV Superfriends were initially formed as a need for a conference in 2019, the Infocom conference. I was putting together a presentation proposal for that, and it was kind of more of a workshop than a presentation. And I needed a bunch of people to help out as we split the idea was we'd split the room into small groups. The groups would kind of work through their own individual scenarios. They kind of have a light competition and come back and share with the larger group. But I needed people to kind of help out and moderate each of those small groups. And so I reached out to people that I had worked with, people that I knew.
We were put together by mostly Chris. He has had several jobs across the country, working at different higher ed institutions, and knew a lot of us from previous jobs he had been in. And what he did was he was teaching courses at Infocom, and he decided, well, hey, let's get a whole bunch of us together, and we'll talk about higher ed AV issues, and we'll teach a course, and we'll have a panel discussion, and we'll do some other things. So he went around and he gathered a whole bunch of us, and we started planning these sessions. And during our planning sessions, the conversations were great. And it was kind of cathartic because we would get together, we would talk about the stuff that's affecting us, and we found out that it's basically the same everywhere. So how can we deliver that message to some of our peers? And so
fall of 2019, we were creating proposals for additional conferences and said, hey, let's keep this group together. Let's do some conference presentations and things together. And so we were kind of meeting and planning that stuff out, and we had some grand designs and plans. And then COVID, so all those conferences got canceled. We kept meeting as a group, just kind of as a weekly, let's stay connected and just kind of share ideas and things like that. And we just kind of kept meeting, and from there kind of said, these conversations are useful.
We started making jokes. Maybe we should just record these and then just give them to people. Wouldn't that be kind of fun? And it was very informal. And we were all on Zoom at the time, and we would hit record, and so there's a whole back catalog of stuff that we've never published because they were just meetings. They were just us sitting around and BSing, right? But then came along higher ed AV and HETMA and COVID and all these other things, and they were going to start this higher ed focused, web presence. And we thought, you know what? Let's do it. Let's just make the podcast.
And that's where the podcast came from. And we've been doing it ever since. So that's coming up on 4 years now, I believe.
The AV Superfriends is kind of an odd name. Where did it come from?
The name AV Superfriends, that came from, I blame Rachel. I have an email from Rachel. As I said previously, we were proposing a bunch of different conference presentations and things. And I would often bounce ideas off of her. Hey, because a lot of the stuff we come up with are not standard presentations. It's rare that we stand in front of a group of people and have a PowerPoint running behind us, sort of thing. We like to involve the audience. It's a different thing. But I would often bounce ideas off of her and say, hey, I'm kind of thinking of this sort of thing, or I want to do this, or what about a session where we do this sort of activity. And one of them, I don't recall exactly what I'm sure I could find the document somewhere, but I don't recall exactly what the scenario was I was proposing, but it had to do with kind of a panel discussion on various topics. And she said, well, this sounds more like you've got a bunch of the super friends getting together to talk about things. And so from there kind of came the name AV Superfriends. And we just kind of stuck with that to the point where I then used that phrase in the conference proposal. As I come up with the description, was join the AV Superfriends for this session. And I started doing that, and that's kind of where the name came from. So we were even branding AV Superfriends for conference presentations in fall of 19 conference presentation proposals in fall of 19 for summer of 2020. That, of course, didn't happen because of COVID, but we kept that name and that identity as we started doing podcasts and things like that.
So what are some of the early struggles that you had to work through?
Examples of early struggles, yeah. I'm almost afraid to go back and listen to some of these early episodes. I was talking to someone actually today who was a new listener. They said, hey, I was listening. They called me right afterwards. They were driving somewhere, and they called and said, hey, I just listened to your show on, which one was Showcase Spaces that just came out. And he was talking about things in there that he listened to and he enjoyed, and some of the conversation. And I said, well, great. I appreciate you enjoy that, but there's 100 other ones to go back to and listen to. So you got quite a backlog there. And then I was thinking about that. It's like, man, I don't know if I want people to go back and listen to those early episodes. I don't know at which point we kind of hit our stride, but early on, I think we really struggled with the hardware. Several of us have changed microphones and interfaces. I think I'm on my third interface. Some of us still struggle. Justin in particular is always seems to be messing with his equipment. But we struggled early on with the format. I mean, that said, let me take a step back. We came up with the initial format of, especially for Off the Rails, because it's a little more of a complex show. The same general format has stuck. We have a short segment at the beginning, news or something to share at the beginning. We have a longer discussion topic, and then we have a short discussion topic, and we have little messages and commercials and things in there. That topic is still there, or that overall format is still there. But early on, we struggled with how to apply that. I mean, we were new to this. We were trying to overly script things. What are we talking about here and there? We would be, having group chats going in the background, telling people what to say and how to say it, and what sort of jokes to use and things. And we'd all try to joke a lot and talk over each other. And having a panel of 5, 6, 7 people is a lot on a show, and it's tough for us to do that. I know I personally I'll intro a topic, I'll throw in some ideas, and I'll take a step back. But yeah, so what are we? I mean, I'm rolling out a new lecture capture system, and one of the big things there was captioning. That was a huge part of that discussion, and capability and how to do it, and can it carry over captions that if somebody manually entered them from the previous system, can it automatically generate them? That was a big part of the discussion. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, we're definitely having that in mind. It comes up a lot within our LMS, our video, all that stuff, the digital experience side of it. And for events and the like, and in classrooms, we're definitely cognizant of providing accessibility. In this article, it made me think a lot about how instructors are using digital content in the classroom, and what does that mean? And it's not intentionally called out that way in this article, but it made me think about that, right? And so our instructors and or people we're working with putting presentation material together for the class in an accessible way in this new world of lots of different content streams, lots of different content overwhelming the student experience from the front of that room, have we stepped back and say, is that really accessible, and what does it mean to other folks that may not be?
But early on, we really struggled with the format. I mean, it was almost awkward, and it was kind of stilted, I think, at times. It was, we wanted it to be conversational, but we were really trying to force that. Can you force being something conversational? I don't know, but that was kind of what it felt like. So yeah, it was a challenge. We're on different pieces. We tried different pieces of software to record with. We were kind of, there's a lot that we did. I'm maybe looking back that there's probably a lot of changes we've made gradually over the years. That it's really taken us, probably several dozen episodes, probably into the 20 or 30s to really kind of get comfortable with the format and what each show looked like and that sort of thing. So, there's a lot of challenges early on. Boy, I don't know, maybe go back and listen to those early episodes. You'll probably hear a great difference between episode 1 and episode 100. I think there's a lot of change there. So.
Chris, when did you realize that there was an audience we could serve?
We realized we were gaining an audience probably from the get-go. I mentioned early on the session we did at Infocom in 2019 that was standing room only. That right there was kind of our eureka moment of there's something here. What would ordinarily look as a standard panel discussion that would be part of any conference you'd see where you get 4 or 5 people up in front of a room to kind of answer questions. We put a spin on that. We were doing, it was interactive. People could submit comments on that. We were kind of playing with a timer and to kind of keep things moving. And I think people were enjoying it. We had one of those catch boxes, those couch cushion microphones that we were throwing around the room. We knew enough people in the room that we could call on people to keep the conversation moving. If we knew that somebody had some pertinent information to share on a topic, but it was a very lively conversation, a very lively session. I want to say it was probably scheduled for an hour, maybe 90 minutes, and we went well beyond that. It's the nice thing about that conference is the sessions were not back to back to back to back, so we didn't have more people coming in right afterwards. So there was some time after that that people had some flexibility, and we just stuck around and kept talking. And so I think we went almost 2 hours on that one, and it was just a lot of fun, very lively. Would have been great to have a recording of that, but that was the moment when we knew there was something here and we needed to build on that.
I actually joined the group the year after the events Chris is referencing. And so this past Infocom really helped to highlight that we were gaining an audience to me. We had done Infocom for the past 3 years, and they've all been much smaller post-COVID. This year still wasn't back to pre-COVID stance, but it was at least close. And we had been doing live shows at manufacturers, and we had press passes to be on the show floor before the event to do a morning show. And that was going really well. We were seeing an impact from our efforts. But we had also scheduled an unauthorized show floor tour the very last day. It wasn't in any of the programs. You couldn't find it through Infocom's official site. We were just promoting it through social media. And we had done this in the past. And, since we're not a registered event, we don't usually expect large crowds. When we got to the booth we were all meeting at, there were over 30 people there waiting for us to walk them around the show floor tour, which was much bigger than we had anticipated. And so just from that experience, and then all of the recognition we were getting at the conference itself, it really started to make me realize that we were gaining an audience. Mark, how do you feel the podcast has evolved?
How has the podcast evolved? I think originally when we first came together, it was more about planning sessions and a lot of what goes into presenting for an audience live, and we built off of that. And I think we kind of grew out of that planning things, and things seemed very structured at first, where we were gonna present this and had this very specific outline and how it was going to work. And I think if you listen to some of those earlier shows, they may seem a little more structured, where as we moved on and did more and more shows, it evolved to be more conversational. It was less structured and less us presenting to the world that it's going to be this thing, and let things kind of unfold naturally. And we've become more conversationally.
First of all, how do we find people? And then how do we find qualified and the right people for our jobs? And so this article basically covers some ideas about how to make your job listing stand out. But I don't know, I figured, what do you guys think? Is this valid information, or is this just somebody using Chat GPT to meet their article quota for the month?
I was very disappointed in the article.
How'd you feel about it, though?
Yeah.
I was pretty disappointed at the article. I think the way that they wrote an article based upon the opinions of hiring and higher ed from 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago. The modernization, the businessification of higher ed.
That's not a word.
Businessification or businessification?
It is now.
We'll give you
and
points for both, but I just want to make sure we know what you're
it's going to be on a sticker next year, by God.
And less scripted and structured. And I think it's been more natural of an evolving process. And while we do plan and put some work into it, I think we intentionally keep space for conversation and don't stress on getting through all the bullet points exactly as we have it planned in the past. So that's one way I've seen it actually evolve.
Since the failure rate of podcasts is so high, why do you think we've been able to last so long?
I think one of the reasons it has worked out as long as it has and how it's been successful is, one, we all kind of get along. And also, we all are the kind of people that we don't really hold back. We call a spade a spade. If a thing works, great. Let's talk about why it worked, how it worked, what the situation was, because these things don't always work in every single situation. And so we try to break that down, vice versa. Some things don't work. Some mythologies don't work. Some ideas don't work. And we call them out. We say, hey, look, these things, this product may not be a bad product. This idea may not be a bad idea, but it doesn't work in these scenarios. I know firsthand because I did it, or so-and-so did it, or I've seen this. And sometimes I think some of these podcasts, especially once they start getting advertisers, sometimes when they start having sponsorships, they become beholden to that. And they're afraid to talk about maybe negative aspects of their sponsors' products. And we don't believe in that. We believe that we want to be transparent and we want to be open. We also don't go out there and just say, this is our favorite thing, you should buy it forever. We do try to stay platform agnostic. We try to talk about products without fanboying products. And we try really hard to stay down that line.
Anything that's not a special application gets letterboxed or pillar barred, and it drives all of us freaking bonkers, or they stretch it. For digital canvases in a room where you can really just manipulate the crap out of this, because we did have that the responder to on our podcast that said, hey, we're doing this, but they're using it with a video processor and preset things, and it's a digital wall of canvas, and you can drag and crap everywhere you want to go, but it has this video processor in front of it, and great, wonderful. What we keep pushing back on is this single source. Just because Microsoft said it was cool, we all want to do it, and stop it. Just stop it. That's because you can't plug just any old Blu-ray into it. You can't plug any old laptop into it. You can't
Blu-ray.
plug
What
any
year
old...
is this?
What are you doing over there?
Listen, when you go to Walmart and you
He
buy
does
your
shop
AV
at Walmart
there,
for AV. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
right next to my arcade button,
The biggest
you put
problem
an
with
arcade up there and it screws it up.
the biggest problem with 21 by 9 in classrooms and learning spaces is there's ANSI Infocom standards out there for a reason. I can't me being who I am, I cannot throw that in our classrooms because I'm an advocate for the student experience. So unless all of the physical space equates to a good experience within those standards, there's no way in heck I'm going to do that.
And if you are using it for Microsoft Teams, then you can't run those calculations off the height of the screen. You have to run the calculations off 60% of the height of the screen because that's where they put their content.
I think we've lasted long just through sheer grit, determination, perseverance. We enjoy it. I think a lot of us look forward to these times. We meet twice a week. So we meet once midweek to kind of map out logistics and plans and things that are coming up, not necessarily even about upcoming podcasts, but other stuff. We go to conferences, we go, to go to trade shows. We do a lot of stuff there. But then we record generally on Fridays, and you'll hear me say it during the open of each show that it's another Friday afternoon podcast adventure. And at times it's not really a Friday afternoon, but for the most part it is. And I think a lot of us look forward to, I'm speaking for the rest of the group, but I can speak from my perspective. I look forward to those times as it's a time to visit with colleagues and with friends, but it's an enjoyable time and it's something that we look forward to. And the other side is, I think, at least from my perspective, I think the rest of us, we enjoy the feedback we get from the audience. When people come up and say, hey, I was listening to this. I heard you guys talk about this. Oh man, I've dealt with that so many times. Or, hey, we were trying to do something similar. We couldn't make it work. What do you guys do so getting that level of feedback from people is just a lot of fun. We all enjoy talking shop. We enjoy talking technology and applications in educational environments. So it's just another opportunity to do that. So when people come up and tell you how much they enjoy your conversation, that only fuels us to do more.
One of the keys to our success, I feel, has been how engaged we've been with our audience. The first year that we were producing podcasts, COVID was in full effect, so everything was virtual. During that year, we were able to build an audience by presenting at any virtual conference that we could possibly get into. And then after that, we started really investing in these online social communities. That's a great way for you to get feedback from the people who are listening to you and just build a community, which is so important. Chris, what advice would you give to other groups who want to start their own podcast?
I know I get questions about starting podcasts from people all the time, and I have a couple of rules, I guess, suggestions maybe that come to mind right away. Don't start with the equipment. Don't start with the gear. That's when normal people start. In a technology focused field, we all like to start there. And I think it's interesting if you were to break down, and we should probably detail this one of these days. If you were to look at the equipment that everybody uses as part of the AV Superfriends recordings, none of us are using, I don't think any of us are even using the same microphone. We're using different microphones, different headphones, different computer software locally and whatnot to manage our stuff. We use different USB audio interfaces. I think every single one of us are using, well, I take that back. I think Larry and I are using the same audio interface. Aside from that, every single piece of gear is different because we all have our own preferences. So it's just to say, because people come and say, what mic should I buy? What system should I be using? What software? It's like, whatever works for you, but there are some initial things there. So a couple of things I bring up when people ask about starting a podcast, and I mentioned it earlier, it's not real until you have 10. Focus on your content and your voice first, because if you don't have something interesting to say, it's why are we listening? You do need, there's a minimum threshold for microphones and things. Don't use your Bluetooth headphones. They sound terrible. Don't use, the laptop microphone or whatever. That sounds terrible too. We've all been on those Zoom calls where people are doing that, and you can tell. But you don't have to start with a $700 microphone and go from there, because if you have a bad, noisy environment in which you're recording, having a great microphone just makes all that noise sound better. It doesn't improve the actual environment itself. You can't beat physics with technology.
I made the mistake of going out and buying a nicer microphone as we were getting started, and found out that in my house with kids and animals and the like going on in the background, that a nice condenser microphone is going to hear all that. And I've found myself having to get into the realm of soundproofing and creating an environment that was more isolated and kept out all the unwanted noises. because it was a higher end microphone with a nice preamp and all these things. And since I've downgraded to just a dynamic microphone and a really simplified interface, sometimes it sounds good, I guess. Sometimes it doesn't, but it does force me to speak up.
It doesn't really matter if the name on your microphone is the $16,000 voice microphone that so-and-so you saw on YouTube uses. It's okay. What we recommend is that you buy not an earbuds microphone, not an on your laptop microphone, just a plain USB mic. A lot of them will just work. Learn how to use it. There's usually tons of reviews out there that says, hey, this thing is worth it or not. You can get some pretty decent ones between $50 and $100, and it's USB directly to your computer. You don't have to have any fancy interfaces. Do what's in your budget. Once you have better budget, buy better equipment. Obviously, we recommend that you have the best quality possible within reason, right? It's the same as we always encourage, we all use wired headphones to listen to ourselves and to our interviews because it's one less, wireless sometimes doesn't sound great, but it's also your computer's not having to cancel out the speakers that are there. So you get a better recording, a better product. Very simple. A pair of wired headphones are very cheap and economical, and they do improve what you're trying to do. So keep those things in mind. You don't need the highest recommended name brand microphone to get started. You just need a microphone that's not built into your computer.
I also talk about software. Do not record on Zoom. A lot of people still do it, but do not record on Zoom. The quality just isn't there. Yes, you can make Zoom sound pretty good. And to their credit, Zoom has gotten very good about making terrible audio sound acceptable. That is to say, the people on those calls who are using they're on their phone in their car, or they're connected. They're on their laptop in a busy house, and the kids and the dogs are running all over the place. Zoom has gotten really good at managing that level of audio. The problem is that level of audio doesn't sound great when you try to record for a podcast. So don't use Zoom. There's any number of other pieces of software out there.
We've tested several. The time alignment and the way that it's dealing with multiple microphones and it giving us a raw recording of everybody's voice, and it's not ducking. It's not, trying to do an auto mix thing that many of the collaborative conferencing solutions provide. We want that raw experience. We want everybody's track on there. So we focused on identifying recording software that allowed us to just be natural, right? Everything we do goes down there, whether we're talking over top of each other or not. It's not being auto mixed. It's isolated, and it's time correct, right? And so that when I take those tracks afterwards and put them into our editor, 0 is 0 and 10 is 10, and everybody's aligned. So focusing on recording platforms that allow you to have that true time alignment, you're not just getting these floating time bases, becomes really important. We did look for that in our solution. CleanFeed does that for us. And then having a good bit rate in that product, and they do an incredible job of giving us a really quality recording. Some of the other options out there were a little bit thinner at times. So some of the conferencing pieces may not give you that true recording level that you may be seeking as during isolated tracks for a podcast with multiple guests and the like. So focusing on that software was really important for us because we wanted to make sure that we were able to deliver that. We didn't want to have the phone experience per se. We wanted to have a really nice, clean sound from everybody on the show. And then kind of as part of that conversation, the software we use to edit down, it's super imperative for us to have a really solid template base so that we can easily get those tracks in there, apply all our general EQ, compression, and the like, and output those. So we have a common sound that can be replicated show after show, at least get it within bounds of reason so it does sound like the same thing and it's not a whole new show every time. Having that starting point, and we do share some of that burden as far as editing down. So we wanted to have a true cloud play. So our recording software is cloud-based, as well as our editing software. I have a group account that we can use, and those templates do exist in a cloud native. So if I'm doing an edit or somebody else on a show wants to edit, they at least have access to those same template files. And so it can be done by anybody in the show that can open it up and have success with that and not be reinventing the wheel every single time. So something that was easy to use, that gave us the level of control, dynamics, EQ, things like that, compression and kind of rendering. Most DAWs do offer that, but quality recording software on our front side, clean feed, and then bringing that into our standard template approach from our Studio One product, and then exporting that out.
Also, don't spend too much time on editing. Try to turn it around faster and get those out there, because you want something to be relevant. When you're publishing things that you recorded a month or 2 or 3 ago, you're spending way too much time on it. So keep it conversational.
Jamie, why do we always say that content is king?
We say that all the time on our show. As AV integrators, as audiovisual integrators for higher ed, our systems are not the star of the show. They're not. We say it all the time. We want to employ systems that enable the faculty, the students, the administrators, the presenter to make their content the star. That's why we're all there. That's our goal in our everyday AV lives. We try to also say that with our podcast as well. The content is king. It doesn't matter how fancy your video graphics are. It doesn't matter how awesome your camera picture quality is if all they're doing is sitting there and staring at a blank face, or when they're listening, that it's just somebody going stuff. That's not fun. Content is king. So we do lots of planning, tons of planning. And we talk about it, and we say, this is what we want to talk about. And we even look at it, because we all have a variety of ways, we try to break it down to make sure that we have a voice that's not always just handshaking and high-fiving, that there is a little conflict, there is a little interest. And we also try very hard to find content that is relevant to our industry now. Whether that's teaching mythologies, whether that's a piece of equipment, whether that's budgets, staffing, training. We talk about all of it because we're trying to reach other peers and give them an avenue to say, oh, I never thought of it that way, or I have this issue and they just helped me think about another way to tackle that issue. That's our goal. But you have to have that content. It also means you have to have that planning, and you have to have some idea where you're headed with that content.
As you can see, building a podcast is a long-term endeavor. Success will not happen quickly, but when it's maintained, it can start to build organically. Thanks for joining us, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the AV Superfriends, and we'll be glad to assist.
It's all about what are we calling standard. Like, obviously, I think what you all are doing is more standardized than what we're doing for a university.
I don't know.
level
A standard's a
classroom.
standard, right?
Yeah,
Even low standards are
really.
standards. Okay, if you can teach and learn them in there, I guess we're good enough.
Teach and learn. Teach and learn.
I said teach them and learn them.
Teach them and learn them.
Well, learning them. What do you guys do in Kentucky? Learning them, people.
We learned. We learned.
They've been learnt on.
Learned it.
Done been learnt.
Done been learned.
Thanks for putting up with yet another episode of AV Superfriends On Topic. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at avsuperfriends.com.